Hello, I'm just going to do a quick tutorial on how to hoop up or frame up your fabric ready for hand embroidery, and also show you how to do it for machine embroidery as well. So I'm going to do two fabric examples, one that's stretchy and one that's not stretchy. This is the fabric that's not stretchy, so it's just like a soft type of cotton. And so if you're using, you might have a frame or you might have a hoop. This is just an example of a hoop, but you can get square frames as well, or rectangular frames. This one's a circular one, so you'll have two parts to it either way. One with an adjustable part to it, and the other is just one plain hoop or frame. This one, for hand embroidery, the plain hoop goes behind your fabric, which will be the back of the surface that you're stitching onto. So when you're doing hand embroidery, the side that has the screw is the side that you'll see at the front of your embroidery. So you just need to slot that on top so that the other hoop is going inside it with the fabric sandwiched in between. And then the next bit might be easier. You have to sort of make sure that the hoops don't fall apart, because you need them to stay in this position. So you can hold them in between your forefinger and your thumb, and you can what you need to do is screw the screw by hand as tight as you can possibly get it by hand. Some people find this easier to do on the edge of a tabletop if you wanted to do it sort of at a different angle, but I'm just holding mine up at the moment to do it. When it gets harder to tighten, that's when you might want to put it on the edge of a tabletop if you want to use like a screwdriver or maybe a small coin to just turn that even more. But do it as much as you can by hand, and then what you're going to do is turn it over upside down so the screw side is face down, and then holding with whichever hand you feel more comfortable to use, hold down the inner hoop so it doesn't pop out, and then you're pulling the surrounding fabric outwards or upwards so that you're pulling it tighter, so it's more taut and stretched in the hoop. So you don't want to overstretch it. It will be hard to really overstretch it in a non-elasticated fabric. But you keep doing it until it doesn't budge anymore. Obviously you don't want to do it too much that you're ripping the fabric, because for some fabrics might be more fragile. And then now when you lift it up and you go to screw the adjustable side again tighter, you'll feel there's a little bit more room now to tighten it more. And you can basically keep doing that until you're happy with how tight it is, how snug the fabric is in the hoop. And you can just push the inner hoop upwards a little bit so that your adjustable hoop goes down, and that will add more like tautness to the fabric. And a good way to check that it's okay to start stitching with is you can give it a shake, and if the fabric doesn't fall out or the hoops don't fall apart, then you're probably okay. But then also you can give it a little tap, and if it sort of sounds like a drum, then it's probably okay to start. You might find that when you're doing like a long period of stitching you have to adjust it anyway, but you might have done it tight enough to begin with. And then if you were doing this with machine embroidery, you would do it the reversed. So with hand embroidery you want the fabric to be like uppermost, and then with machine embroidery you'd be sewing like this way up, so that the fabric is then touching the base of the machine. So I'm just going to show you an example of hooping up as well with an elasticated fabric, because it's basically the same, but it's other things that you have to bear in mind. When you've had your hoop on for quite a long time as well, you'll get this ring, but you can just iron that out afterwards as well, that's fine. So I've got like a lycra fabric now to show you with the hoop. So when I took it off I loosened it a bit, so I don't really need to loosen it at the start again. And then put my other plain side of the hoop underneath. When you're doing it as well, I forgot to mention on the other piece of fabric, you want to make sure that you are leaving like enough fabric around the sides as well, so that it doesn't, because you don't want it to, you want the fabric to be fully stretched and taut. You don't want to have like this edge of the fabric here, because then it won't be getting stretched at all angles in the hoop, and it won't be an accurate like hooping basically. So I've done the same thing that I did last time, and then I'm adjusting it. As much as I can, and then you'll find a stretchy fabric like this. If it's a thin stretchy fabric, you'll just pull it much more easily. Yeah. So the trick is not to overstretch it, so it's visibly tight there. I don't really need to tighten it anymore. I don't need to stretch it anymore, I mean. But I can tighten the screw at the top so that it doesn't fall out of place. You might feel like you need to tighten this, you need to tighten the screw more than you need to pull this fabric out tighter, because it's stretchy, it's got more, and it's got more like elasticity, it will move around more. So where your cotton fabric and non-stretchy fabric will just kind of stay in place once you've tightened it, this has more chance of like moving around and slipping out of the hoop. So I probably use like a screwdriver or something that you can fit into that screw to turn it even tighter for a stretchy fabric. And then just making sure that you're not overstretching it, because if you do, and you've done your embroidery in the middle, whatever you've stitched, say if you did like a little design here, whatever you've stitched, when you take it out of the hoop, if you've overstretched the fabric, could shrivel up, so it could shrink, which obviously you don't want to happen, because the whole point of using the hoop is to keep your whatever you've stitched nice and tidy and flush with the fabric. So you can get different sizes of these hoops. You can get really big ones, or you can get very small ones, sort of like 3-inch sized hoops. And say if you were doing like a certain area and then you wanted to continue and you didn't want it to fit in this shape, I'd try and use a bigger hoop if you can that fits the whole panel, and then you could maybe do the corners by hand without a hoop. So that's what I would try and do. But if you can only get a small one, you can sort of move it around as well. When you're using different fabrics, like if you did want to put chiffon or organza in a hoop, just be careful when you're pulling it, because obviously it's very thin and fragile and you don't want to tear it. So it can go in a hoop, you just have to be much more wary of how you're handling it. And the same with thicker pieces of material. So if you wanted to put something like denim in it, in an embroidery hoop, you would just have to make sure you start off with a looser hoop, and then, because obviously it's a bigger thickness to try and fit into it. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope that was helpful in helping you with your panels.